Good afternoon. We call this meeting of the Community Development Board to order on November 19th. Welcome, everyone. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the City Council and serve voluntarily. I am Michael Butzkus, and I will ask the other members and the staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Mary Lau.
Mike Flannery. Brian Barker.
Michael Foligno, Assistant City Attorney.
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development Department.
Elizabeth Vanscoy.
Jordan Dana. John Quattrocki.
Chris Sanaskevich.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so that we might hear all the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us. Clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Now I'll ask those in attendance today who plan to speak to please rise and be sworn in by the clerk.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony about to give the entire truth?
I do.
Thank you. Agendas of today's meeting are on the podium to your left near the entry door. Also on this podium are a roster of the Community Development Board, the list of city staff experts and their resumes, the board's rules of procedure, and the annual schedule of this board. Our first order of business today is to review and approve the minutes from last month's meeting. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes or any changes?
Move to approve.
To approve. Second.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. This board has adopted a consent agenda. Well, before I go there, there's citizens to be heard. For items on the agenda. So at this point, if there's anybody in the audience today who wishes to be heard on a matter that's not on today's agenda, please come forward to the podium. Seeing none, then we'll continue with our agenda items. This board has adopted a consent agenda format, and the consent items are identified as such on the agenda. Consent agenda items are those items for which the Planning Development Department recommends approval. The applicant is in agreement with any proposed conditions, and no written objections to the case have been received to date. Items may be removed from the consent agenda today by a member of the board, a member of the staff, or any person in the audience for questions or objections. I'll read each item on the consent agenda, and if any person wishes to remove this item from the consent agenda, please so state or raise your hand, and we will remove it from the consent agenda. Items removed from the consent agenda will be heard in the regular order of the meeting. Items that remain on the consent agenda will be approved with a single vote. The items on today's agenda are as follows. Item 1 is case FLD 2015-02006A, 40 Devon Drive. The owner is Decade Sea Captain LLC, and the agent is Robert Odd. The location is on the north side of Devon Drive, approximately 150 feet east of Coronado Drive, and we are reviewing an amendment to approve a Level 2 flexible development application for the construction of a detached dwelling. Does anybody wish to have this item removed from the consent agenda? There being none. The next item on our agenda, there are actually objections that were received today. So case FLD 2019-08026 is going to be removed from the consent agenda and heard in the ordinary course. Our third item is case TA 2019-10005, amendments to the Community Development Board. The applicant is the City of Clearwater, and reviewing a request to amend the City of Clearwater's Development Code to adopt international property maintenance codes and certain local amendments. Does anybody wish to have that item removed from the consent agenda? There being none, may I have a motion to remove, one's a level 2 and one's a level 3, so we'll have to split that motion up. So may I have a motion to approve the first item on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve case number FLD 2015-02006A on today's consent agenda based on evidence in the record, including the application of the staff report, and hereby adopt findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with conditions of approval as listed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion on the level 3 item?
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval of case TA 2019-10005 based on findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the staff report.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so moving on with our regular agenda. We'll now move on to the regular agenda. There are two types of cases that will be heard today, quasi-judicial and legislative. I will outline the procedures for each hearing at the beginning of the respective hearings. The procedures for quasi-judicial quasi-judicial hearings, level 2 cases, are such that flexible development are considered quasi-judicial hearings, and in quasi-judicial hearings, the Community Development Board reviews the application, the staff report, correspondence, and all evidence presented today, and makes the final decision subject to appeal. This board has previously qualified all the city staff who will testify as experts in the area of professional training, education, and expertise. The list of city staff experts and their resumes are on the handbook on the podium near the entry door. Any other professionals who desire to be qualified as an expert witness shall so request at the beginning of the case and present a resume to each board member. The board shall determine whether or not to qualify the person as an expert and in what fields of study. At the beginning of each level 2 case, I will ask for anyone who wishes to request party status to come forward and state your reasons. Party status may be granted if the person requesting such status demonstrates that he is a substantially affected person. The board will then determine whether or not to grant party status. Then the case will proceed as follows. Request for party status, presentation by planning and development staff, 10 minutes maximum, presentation by the applicant, 10 minutes maximum, presentation by persons with party status, 5 minutes per party maximum. Cross-examination of witnesses by planning and development staff, cross-examination of witnesses by applicant, cross-examination of witnesses by persons with party status. Comments by the public, 3 minutes per person. Closing remarks by the planning and development staff, 3 minutes. Closing remarks by the persons granted party status, 3 minutes. And closing remarks by the applicant, 3 minutes. The public hearing will then be closed. Discussion and vote will be held by the board. Our first level 2 case today, only level 2 case today, is as follows. It's case FLD 2019-08026 at 2495 Enterprise Road. The owner is Top Software LLC. The agent is Brian Smith. And the location is on the east side of Enterprise Road, approximately 320 feet south of Countryside Boulevard. The request is to review a 16,696 square foot school in the US 19 zoning district for the property located at 2495 Enterprise Road. First item is anybody requesting in this case to be granted party status?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Todd Pressman, 200 2nd Avenue South in St. Petersburg. I'm representing a number of businesses, including Jerry Gottlieb, who is a tenant in the building, the Will Caesar here, who own the building right next door, and I believe Dr. Levine, who owns the building next door, his representative is here as well.
Okay. So are you requesting party status?
Yes, sir.
For your, as a collective, for all the people you just identified, or each person party status, so we can be clear?
I'm speaking, well, the folks are sitting here and they're a little, first time they've been here, so I'm speaking on their, just on the party record status.
Okay, so we'll take them one at a time. So the first person seeking party status would be
Myself,
yourself?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, individually, or?
Yes.
And you're from St. Petersburg?
I'm sorry, sir?
You live in St. Petersburg?
I'm representing one of the affected persons.
Okay, so that's not party status on behalf of yourself then, correct? You individually would have no standing. What party are you requesting party status for?
Dr. Jerry Gottlieb,
Would you spell that, please?
Spell Dr. Gottlieb's name?
Gottlieb,
G-O-T-T,
Gottlieb,
his first name?
Richard.
And Mr. Pressman, I don't want to step on your party status here. You mentioned individually. What's the basis for the individual request? You are here as an agent for somebody else.
I'm here for an agent with Mr. Gottlieb, who is a tenant in the building directly next door.
Understood. So you are not requesting party status for yourself. You're requesting party status for Mr. Gottlieb with you as his agent.
Of which I'm representing.
Gotcha.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So let's go through this again so that we're all clear on the party status by somebody who's not the actual party, because we had this in the hearing that took a while, a few months back. I think the issue for us as a board is identifying whether he has all the information that his client has, so we can identify answer questions, and the parties are afforded due process by having a right to cross-examine the actual person who's asserting to be the party here. Correct?
Your rules didn't then and don't now specifically address this circumstance, so you'll simply want to keep in mind the fundamentals of due process.
Understood. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Pressman? Does anybody have a motion to grant party status for Mr. Pressman on behalf of Mr. Gottlieb? Dr. Gottlieb?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Motion made and second. Is there any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so party status. Who else would like to seek party status?
Sandra Wilsey, address 2475 Enterprise Road, next door to this.
Spell your last name, please, for the clerk.
Willsey.
Okay, thank you. And you're immediately next door?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have a motion to grant party status?
I move to grant party status to Ms. Woolsey.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Party status granted. Sir?
Greg Wilsey, resident of Clearwater, 2475 Enterprise Road, co-owner right next door.
And you're separately requesting party status?
Right.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Wilsey?
So moved.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Sir?
Todd Birch, BRCH, I'm the administrator for Foot and Ankle Specialist at 2521 Countryside Boulevard.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or a motion?
I move to grant party status. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So this board has granted party status to Mr. Pressman on behalf of Dr. Gottlieb, Mrs. Wilsey, Mr. Wilsey, and Mr. Birch. And we will proceed now. The granting of party status entitles you to these additional rights: personally testifying, presenting evidence by documentary submittal, presenting witnesses, conducting cross-examination of witnesses, presenting argument, and appeal the decision of the board to a hearing officer and/or to a circuit court. So continuing on with this case, staff?
Mark Perry, Planning and Development.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, before Mr. Perry begins his presentation, the city would request that Mr. Perry be accepted as an expert in the matters that he's about to testify, which include but are not limited to redevelopment planning, comprehensive planning, annexation implementation, zoning, land use rezoning applications, land development, general planning code amendments, landscaped ordinances, and special area plans in the overlay districts.
So moved. Second.
Motion made, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Mr. Perry, please continue.
All right, thank you. The site is 1.73 acres. It's located along Enterprise Road. It's within the US 19 zoning district, and specifically within the US 19 Regional Center Subdistrict. So it is subject to the US 19 zoning district and development standards. The site is currently occupied by a 16,696 square foot building that's been most recently used as an office. It's located within a large... There we go. The building and the site is located within a larger retail plaza that consists of 11 parcels. And I just want to note that there is an existing cross-access and parking agreement that affects not only the subject parcel, but the overall plaza, which essentially consists of all the properties from the Dogwater Grill, the former Toys R Us site. It does not include the Chick-fil-A site, the Wawa site, or the Foot and Ankle site that are directly on Countryside Boulevard, just to put it in perspective. The request is to renovate the existing building to accommodate a school, which is defined in the Community Development Code as an elementary, middle, or high school, and it also does include charter schools as approved by the Pinellas County School Board. Site improvements will be limited to new walkways on site and new landscaping, and also rehabbing existing trees and replanting dead or dying plant material. There are a total of 49 available parking spaces on the subject site. An additional 18 spaces are available within 600 feet of the subject site within that larger Village at Countryside Retail Plaza. Therefore, a total of 67 parking spaces will be made available to the school. With regard to parking, the code does require that one space per 3 students is required. The applicant has provided that the school will operate in 2 shifts. The first shift will start at 7 a.m. and will run through 12 noon, and the second shift starts at 12 noon and will run to 5 p.m. They've said in their application that no more than 200 students will be present per shift, and they've also let staff know that the overlap, although it's 7 to 12 and 12 to 5, the overlap really is a 1-hour stretch between 11:30 and 12:30. That's where the shifts take place. There are 67 parking spaces which are required for 200 students. The subject site itself does have 5 parking spaces located at the southwest corner of the site. Now, one of the criteria does require that no parking spaces be located within 200 feet of residentially zoned property, and as noted in the staff report, there is residentially zoned property to the south and west of Enterprise Road that would be within 200 feet of those 5 parking spaces. Those 5 parking spaces are reserved for exclusive use for the property immediately to the south, which is an office use, so they will not be used for the school. Again, with regard to the parking, there are approximately 51 spaces available on the ex-Toys R Us site. So 18 of those spaces will make up that difference to provide a total of 67 parking spaces. Staff has reviewed the application and all of the supporting materials at its October 3rd, 2019 development review meeting, and has found that the application is consistent with all applicable code requirements and comprehensive plan requirements, including general purpose, CDC section 101-103, general standards for level 1 and 2 development approvals, section 3-914A, applicable components of the city's comprehensive plan, which are laid out in the staff report, and the applicable development standards in CDC section Appendix B, which is germane to the US 19 zoning district and development standards. Those were also laid out in detail in the staff report. Staff is recommending approval of the submittal with a variety of conditions of approval. I won't read all of them, but they do include the replacement of any damaged or destroyed sidewalks adjacent to the site, and that the installation methodology for any of those sidewalks are coordinated and approved by city staff. The solid waste department requires that service be set up prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy. And prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy, the staff is requiring some selective pruning on healthy trees and all required landscaping of dead or dying plant material to be replaced and brought up to code. Also, those 5 parking spaces shown on sheet C1 of the applicant's submittal at the southwest corner of the site, those will have to be marked for the exclusive use of the office building immediately adjacent to the south. If there are any questions, I'd like to try to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Perry?
Mr. Perry, could you just briefly expand a little on, in response to the objections that we've received regarding the impact of the development of the school on adjacent properties?
Sure. Yeah. The applicant has provided that historically about 150 of the students use PSTA to get to to and from school. We've been told that all of the students receive bus passes, free bus passes for their use. Approximately 50 of the students overall drive themselves. Historically, about 30 students walk or bike, and the remaining students are dropped off. They carpool, they're picked up and dropped off. With regard to the concerns about traffic impacts, which is specifically what you're asking about, and site circulation, I have on the screen, and this was included in your packet, how site circulation is intended to work. The city's engineering department, specifically our traffic engineer, has worked with the applicant regarding their methodology of their traffic study, and they've accepted the findings as valid and accurate, that there shouldn't be any sorts of conflicts or overburdening of the transportation system. We've identified 2 PSTA bus stops. One is along the US 19 frontage road. Another one is along Countryside Boulevard. With regard to code requirements and parking standards, which is all I can legally look at. I look at the code tells me 1 space per 3 students. It also requires 4 spaces per 1,000 square foot of gross floor area for a variety of other permitted uses in this zoning district. And what I'd like to point out is that generally speaking, there are a number of required, of permitted uses that are in this zoning district. And they run the gamut from residential to office, retail, bars, nightclubs, restaurants, indoor recreation, things like that. Those all require 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Based on the size of the building, that would require about 68 parking spaces. So the current proposal per our code, which is what I have to look at and apply, requires 67. So just from a straight parking impact from the proposed use to most of the permitted uses, residential has a parking per dwelling unit, but that's not being proposed at all. The parking is effectively a wash. And just to reiterate, the school day does start at 7, so the first shift is starting at 7 o'clock, which is probably prior to opening of most of the businesses in the area, probably with the exception of maybe of Chick-fil-A and the Wawa. And the last shift is at 5 o'clock p.m. So I don't know if that answers your question. If more specific questions regarding methodology and things like that, I would defer to either the applicant and/or the city's traffic engineer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Flannery, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to flesh that out. Some areas I don't quite understand. You said that there's going to be signs up that says for these 4 location spaces are reserved for somebody else. How can they do that legally? How is that not physically possible? If the covenant says all of them share, I'm looking at this map here, that shows all of them share, then how do they block out some? Is there a way in the covenant that they can say, I get so many per property, or legality, I didn't understand that.
Legally, I'm not sure how to answer that question from a legal standpoint, but from a practical standpoint, we would look at that as operations. And it's going to be, if approved, it's a recommended condition of approval, that they post those signs and that the applicant reserve those spaces for the use adjacent to the south, which those parking spaces are closer to that building anyway. So that's really more of an operations sort of topic. I don't think I can speak from a legal standpoint.
And the second one is that I understand then from what I thought you said is that all those spaces along the former Toys R Us are going to be used for their parking.
No, just based on square footage and 4 spaces per 1,000, there's 51 excess parking spaces located on the Toys R Us site, 18 of which the applicant will be able to use to fulfill their obligation of providing 67 spaces on their site. So they're not using all of them, just the 18 that they need.
And how was, by the way, I was all for this. I didn't know anything about the parking problem. It sounds like a no-brainer up to now. How did they come up with prior, they're moving a school from someplace else?
Correct.
So is that in a location that would have been more urban or something? Is it equivalent to this location with the buses and everything?
The existing location is on McMullen Booth Road, so I would assume that there is.
They're moving the school?
Yeah, they're moving their operations. Yeah, that was specified in the staff report. They're actually going to move their operations from one site to this site. They're currently operating at 2461 McMullen Booth Road. They've been there for 11 years.
Quick question out of curiosity, is there a single property owner and these are leased, all of these buildings are leased, or are they individual owners within?
They're individual properties. They have individual social ID numbers, so they have.
Shared parking on individual?
Yeah, there is, and that was included in the applicant submittal, the original, still valid cross-parking, cross-access agreement. I think it dates to 81 or something like that.
Do we have any other questions of staff? There being none, next would be the applicant. Does the applicant have any presentation?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Smith. I'm representing the applicant. We work very closely with staff to address all the concerns of the traffic and the parking on the property, and we feel like we've got a lot of history behind us on how they operate. Today we have with us some of the school administrators. We've got our civil engineer and our traffic engineer to answer any questions you might have. If I might turn it over to Donna. She's been with the school since its beginning. Almost. And she'll give you a little more history of the school.
Hi, good morning. I'm Donna Hobart. I'm currently the director of Enterprise High School, and we are currently operating at 2461 McMullen Booth Road, which is Oakbrook Plaza. We are in a very large complex right now. We are in the backside of a complex, and we are very good neighbors with all of the businesses that are currently in our complex. So we look forward to being good neighbors with our new neighbors when we move. Our student is an older population. Our youngest student is 16 and the oldest student is 21. The common denominator for our students is that they just couldn't be successful in the traditional larger high schools. So for whatever reason, they needed to have a smaller environment. We are very successful. We have a very good working relationship with Pinellas County School Board, and they can speak also to our success as a school. We graduate anywhere between 100 to 160 students a year, and that's with a regular high school diploma, not GED. So as far as the movement of students, because I think that's the biggest concern, during the middle of the day, 11:30 to 12:30. We do serve breakfast and lunch at our school. So our afternoon students are invited in as early as 11:30. They can arrive into the building and they could eat during that time. So they have a half an hour time that they could spend inside the building eating their lunch. And then our morning students can stay from 12 until about 12:20, and they can have their lunch at that time. So there's not a huge influx of students coming in and going out at any one specific time. Also at our school, we have a number of whole families at our school. So even if a parent is dropping off a student, it's probably just not one, it may be 2 or 3. So it really is, if we have more than 3 cars in front of our building at any one time, that is a lot. So these are high school students, the parent drives up, drops off, and the student jumps into the school. So no one's waiting for anybody. And with phones and texting, everything is very easily communicated. Any questions?
Do you have any questions, Ms. Holbrook?
I just have one. Do you feel, based on what you just said, how the operation, do you feel that the parking that you're going to be allocated is adequate?
Yes, because when I made an estimate of 25 students, that was a high estimate that would drive themselves and park the car in the facility. So I just tried to take a good guess at a high estimate. So I really think it's much lower than that. A lot of our kids are already working 25, 30, 35 hours a week, if not full-time. So some of our kids may have to have a special schedule with us where they're leaving at 3 or 4 to get to their job. So I don't think, we don't have any concerns right now. We just have a parking area right in front of our current building with businesses on either side of us. So there's never been a concern. Most of our students use the PSTA bus passes. We spend anywhere between $4,000 to $6,000 a month on bus passes. So we give the kids daily and weekly bus passes.
Any other questions from Ms. Holbrook?
How many staff and teachers would be on shift at the same time?
Yep, we have 23 full-time staff members and 3 part-time staff members. The part-time staff members usually start their day around 9 o'clock and leave around 1:30. So they try to be there in the bulk, middle of the day. So,
And are most of them driving themselves as well?
most of the staff?
Yeah.
I would say yes. I would say yes, most of the staff drive themselves. I do actually have 2 staff members that take the PSTA bus.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from Ms. Holbrook? Any questions from Mr. Smith?
I just have a couple other things on the 5 parking spaces that were within 200 feet of the residential. We weren't trying to exclusively dedicate those to any one person, but it would be signed so that school parking would be prohibited. That would allow everybody else in the community to use those parking spaces. So I think that addresses the legal issue on it. And there are 1,141 parking spaces in the development. There's only, by code, needed 978. So in excess of 163 parking spaces exist right now.
Do you know what the covenants say or allocates this building for the number of parking?
There's no specifics to it. It's just a general cross-access parking easement.
Any other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next would be presentations by persons with party status. Mr. Pressman, you got up first, so I'll call everybody in order.
If we could go to the overhead, please.
Said aye.
Mr. Chairman and board members, address the 200, what's that, sir?
I say it's up there, but we can't see it on that screen there for some reason.
Can you see it in front of you?
No, there it is. It popped up now.
Okay, great. Mr. Chairman,
Somebody
board
was
members,
listening.
Todd Pressman, 200 Second Avenue South in St. Petersburg, Florida. This proposal is opposed by the entire office community. The site's located here is opposed by these entities and the residential entity right across the street. Now, staff made a big deal about this being a big commercial area, but the fact is the heavy commercial is in front. Everything in the rear is office and professional and residential. That's the character of this particular area. These are some of the buildings in that area. You can see it's a very quiet medical professional office establishment, including kidney care, and there's medical uses there as well. Very sensitive medical uses and care. This is another to give you an idea. Now, what's interesting here, which you didn't see on the overhead, is they're proposing to bring in circulation all the way through this parking area over to the school. And by the way, this states 200 students. It's incorrect. That's drastically incorrect. It's 400 students twice a day. Then now we learn they're going to be intermingled during the lunch hours of, it sounded like 2 hours. So they're going to have a primary drop-off here a secondary drop-off here, where these kids are going to be having to access here, these kids are going to have to access here and back. So you're going to have commingling of retail, commercial, sick people, as you saw from the kidney dialysis, they have people there all day long. From the foot center, they're going to have to negotiate all of this, what we consider to be a mess. That's in our opinion. So you're going to have conflicts, which I'll give you a letter from our traffic engineer, that is bad. We don't want to do that. Let me say overall that I'm sure this is a good school and good people, but the premise here is that this is a bad location. It doesn't work here. We did take the opportunity to visit their site over in Clearwater, and they're in in my opinion, they're a much quieter, isolated area. But what we saw like high school kids do, hanging out, skateboarding, smoking, as you can see here, and that's fine. But we don't believe that belongs here. That also goes against their argument, as I read it and understood it, that they're going to have one group of students come in nice and clean, they're going to leave, then the second 200 kids come in, and there's no interplay. But clearly there isn't an interplay, as we heard from the director, they offer meals for 2 hours, so it's not going to be 200 and 200, it's going to be 400 at one time. We also did pull a sheriff's report, which I'm going to give you in the packet. Ms. Wilsey will look at that. There are some alarming and concerning calls on the sheriff's report that include juvenile activity, attempting to place warrants, and other elements she'll speak to. When I was there was a continued presence of a sheriff's officer that day, and they are required to have an armed security guard on board, according to the sheriff's office. So you have a number of criteria that speak directly to this issue. Your general applicability criteria: one, that's a harboring character of the adjacent properties. We believe it is not. This is a quiet office, medical, sick people coming and going. Two, it doesn't hinder or discourage the use of adjacent land and buildings. Clearly, this flow, in our opinion, is going to create quite a problem. When I look at our transportation engineer's letter that I'll give to you, he cites a number of things. He cites the ITE rate used was for a charter school. The more appropriate code would have been a private school, twice as much as an elementary school that was used in the school report. His next point is that the ITE trip represents total driveway volumes. Therefore, reduction for bus service, carpooling, siblings, student drivers are included in the counts, shouldn't be discounted. He also indicates there's a number of errors of vehicles on Enterprise, and lastly notes, furthermore, the access to the parking area in front of the retail building. School trips will have to maneuver through the retail office parking area, forming on-site queues. If there's more than 8 vehicles, it will block that throat. I'll put this in the record.
What are you reading to us there?
This is from a traffic engineer that we hired, traffic planning and design in Orlando, Florida. I'll give you this copy if you like, and I'll have a copy for all the board members. So we are alarmed at some of the findings that we have from our traffic engineer. I will say again that we are sure this is a good use and these are good people. This is not a good location. I'm also going to give to you a number of petitions from the residential. It's about approximately 20 signatures from the residential to the rear. You have letters from a number of other businesses that are budding. I'll put these in the record, sir.
You're going to put the traffic engineers?
Yeah, I have packets for the board members. I'm just referring to that separately. So, the traffic report is in this packet to you. Signatures are separate.
Mr. Pressman, just
Yes,
so
sir.
clear, you're not giving me copies of multiple petitions, you've given me a single on each page,
Yeah,
right?
there are approximately 20 residential signatures. More residents showed up at the offices today to offer opposition. A lot of the elements for safety or concern that have been mentioned are not enforced. Some of the board members picked that up. They're not guaranteed. They're not in writing. They don't have control, as some of the board members brought up. Those are very concerning. We appreciate your attention, and the neighborhood is very concerned. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Grossman?
Would you mind just putting the aerial back up that shows the abutting businesses and just show us how they get in and out of their businesses?
Access here, primary drop-off is here, which is in the middle of a drive aisle.
You need to zoom out a little bit because we can't even see where you're pointing to.
Thank you.
There we go.
Access driveways here, primary drop-off is in the middle of a drive aisle, a busy drive aisle for a heavy retail, some commercial coming through, all these uses.
No, how do the people you're representing, how do they Where's their main entrances? How do they get in and out?
Where's
This is
Dr.
the main
Gottlieb's
entrance
office
right
at?
here. This office here. The kidney dialysis is here, so they're primarily using this access point.
But what about the driveway to the southeast there?
There's an access, another cut-through road there, but the kidney dialysis people would use it.
There is another access there that is usable. but
Push that up a little further.
doesn't appear to
I
be
can't see the bottom
Not
of
on
that.
screen.
There you go. Thanks.
Is that a direct access?
Yeah, to the side of the building,
You can't
not
speak,
to
wait,
anything
I'm
else.
sorry, you need to be at the,
There is an access here, yes. That is one access that is usable. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, did you,
Mr. Flannery, go ahead.
would you like this, Mr. Barber?
You can leave it up on the screen, I think, for right
Yeah,
now.
why don't you just leave it up on the screen, we can all see it, if you don't mind.
Mr. Flannery, your question?
Did you bring this up at the development review meeting?
Unfortunately, it was not made aware to the public, and the public did not get up to speed and aware until really just late last week. So we were scrambling to get together to bring these issues forward to the board.
So you haven't really, and has the city traffic engineer had a chance to comment on, sorry, I didn't realize I had all the copies. A comment on this. I mean, I do understand it puts anybody at a disadvantage if they don't know when it's already been worked out. And then here you are, and it seems like you should have had an opportunity to discuss your concerns and maybe worked something out before it just was already, or it sounds like it was canned and you just got it. Is that correct?
Say it again, sir?
The solutions were in the can and you got the real of it.
Yes, sir.
Where it is, you didn't have a chance to talk and work any of this out with
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah, typically the applicants have many months to work through those issues. We had a scant, very little bit of time, barely got the traffic engineer, begged him to look at it and just point out for us errors and problems that he saw.
Has the city traffic engineer had a chance to comment on this?
No, that report was done and finished, and as you said in the case.
And the idea of having two shifts of 200 versus one shift of 200, that has not been,
That's a tremendous difference. As we read through the materials and understood, it was clearly, it would be 200, a break, 200, but now we're hearing, we surmise, we're thinking that would really be 400, and we heard today that it will be 400. It will be 400 during that middle period of the day. So there will not be a clean sweep between those two groups, as I heard it today. Serving lunch, serving breakfast. And as we saw, as we checked out the site, as I showed you, they're high school kids. I mean, that's what they do. They're going to hang out a little bit. It's social time for them. That's not a problem. The problem is that it doesn't work here.
The building that says Dermo,
Yes.
is that the front entrance, like right where it says 13,878 square feet? Is that where you enter the building?
My experience when I visited there is that the entrance is here, the kidney entrance is here, as I recall.
And that's an entrance off of US 19 Service Road?
There is an entrance here, yes.
Anybody have any questions, Mr. Crossman?
Just, can you put that back and just point out where is Dr. Gottlieb's office?
He's right here.
Slide it up again. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Next person with party status was Ms. Wilsey.
Thank you, everyone. I'm looking at this as a completely different angle than everybody else is talking about. I know you're doing all your legalese and all that, great for you. I understand that has to be managed. I looked long and hard before I purchased this property and making sure it was a good fit before I made the investment, and then remodeled it and upgraded it. So I am very clear that I have responsibility for my tenants, which is Rick Gottlieb, and a wealth management firm, and their employees. We have already people problems with the Wawa and the Chick-fil-A, people walking on our green space, that's ours, with our picnic table out back, and by the door that our employees leave, come and go, a private door. We have posted signs to please stay away. We have cameras. I don't know what else to do. And I don't know how in the world anybody thinks that somebody's going to monitor all these kids and they're all just going to easily come and go. And who's going to stand there and watch 400 kids come and go? And who's going to say that's not going to happen? Nobody's looking across the park, across the street that little kids go play. These are not regular high school kids. These are kids that couldn't make it in high school. And so they have something else. Not a bad idea. It doesn't need to be there. And if anybody took some time and walked around and see these elderly people trying to get in and out, it's already a bad situation as it is. I think it should be the same use. This is supposed to be used. How is it going to fit into the harmony and character? But we all discussed what is this. Harmony and character is number one. It will not impact the character in the immediate vicinity. Discourage appropriate development, number two. Who's going to be my tenant next time around? Okay, when they see all this going on. And their employees are getting the cars dinged, or hopefully not backed into or hit by somebody. These are my concerns. And I challenge you to help me monitor this. Who's going to be sitting there doing this? None of you. That's really all I have to say. Oh, the traffic, the police reports. Yeah, so my goodness. So I guess so we can share this with you too. It's like lots of warrant services, drug calls at this school, harassing phone calls, theft, more warrant services. Emotionally disturbed person, Baker acted, a couple of those. More warrants, more warrants. Another Baker Act, assault and battery. This is not the normal high school. I had raised 5 kids who went to public schools here in Pinellas County. I don't remember all of this going on. I never feared for them, and I don't want to fear for my employees or my tenants. So, anything you'd like to ask?
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Wilson?
This may not be germane to what we're talking about today, but do you have any information about the status of the former Toys R Us building?
No, I do not. I mean, I know that they leased out space during the Halloween season to a costume store. I can't think of the name of it. Yes, during that time. But other than that, I have no idea what's going on in that building.
Anybody have any other questions for Ms. Wilson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, while we have a break in the testimony, may I have a copy of the traffic report?
Yes, where'd that one go with the notes on it? Let's go ahead and get that's the same thing.
Okay. My name's Greg Wilsey, and I'm a resident of Clearwater for over 15 years and a business owner and a commercial building owner for over 7.5 in Clearwater, the property next door to the property being discussed today. I have great concerns, and again, as Sandra said, I encourage all of you to go take a look at this space. It's professional, medical, attorneys, doctors, dentists, lawyers, and has been since the beginning of its time, and to bring in crossover 400 students throughout the day will dramatically change the harmony and character of the adjacent spaces that we're talking about. I feel a little bit played, or a little bit, there's been some dishonesty talking about 200 kids when clearly there's a lot more than 200 kids, and a number of teachers and administrators, as well as the crossover. This is a tremendous amount. To stand up here and to talk about approximately so many cars, that's not a very good way to work business decisions about how you're going to incorporate what decisions you make. Maybe the economy proves, maybe there'll be approximately become 70 cars, or become 90 cars. When you have 16 to 21-year-old kids living in Pinellas County, they want to own a car. Now, maybe they can't all afford to, but they sure want to. And as soon as they can get one, that's what they're going to do. So I don't think approximately is a very good way to go about making these studies. We chose this area because it was a business community center, and this will completely change the character and discourage appropriate development. We talked a little bit about how do we protect these spaces. I don't think there really is a legal way. We didn't concern ourselves with it maybe as much as we should have, with seeing what was around it and the development that had occurred for the entire period of time, that we were going to be fine, our employees were going to be safe. They're going to come at 7 and our employees come at 8, and the first spots they're going to take are the ones right along our route. There's 2 pass-throughs that have a fair amount of traffic going from the access road to the, those will be blocked up and tied up and just unsafe for the patients of the kidney dialysis, and unsafe for our employees, unsafe for our patients who many times, our patients, our clients who are often elderly. I think that talk about minimizing the traffic congestions, these kids will often stay later. They'll often go over to the Wawa, go over to the Toys R Us or to the Chick-fil-A and hang out, and maybe go to other people's houses and come back and get their cars later. So this really is a terrible traffic issue. The fact that Toys R Us isn't there now and doesn't have any standing in this room, you know, someday we'd like it to be another development. That will certainly help the property values of all of us, and I think that should be considered as to what its use is going to be and what its potential use can be sitting out there on the service road. That I don't think this is taking into consideration of that, and maybe taking advantage that there's nobody there right now. The congestion already at Enterprise and Countryside is building up. This will be monumentous. The traffic gets stopped going north, kind of eastbound, if you will, on Belcher to Countryside at the light at 19, and then the light changes at the Countryside Enterprise light, and they can't go because it's backed up at 19. So then people are making U-turns to coming westbound or southbound to go to the Chick-fil-A and the Wawa, and it's become a mess already. This was about the 400 kids that we're talking about passing through here. The community in general, we got a little flyer in the mail, in the U.S. Post mail of 2 weeks ago that was brought to my attention by somebody in the office that opens the mail, by the community board, but not something that I would typically pay attention to. And that was how we got Mark involved a week ago, not knowing what to do. This is all foreign to us, and we don't understand this process. This isn't how we go about it. But we bought this building, again, because of the character of around it, because of the safety that as number 3 talks about, of our clients and of our tenants, because of the appropriate development that number 2 that was around it, because of the character of the adjacent properties, and without a doubt number 5 or number 4, to minimize traffic congestion. There's no way this will minimize traffic congestion. And number 5, the community of the character in the vicinity. As Mark mentioned, we had people knocking at my office door this morning because they had heard Mark had stopped by on Friday just to let them know what was happening. It was the first they knew about it, and they're coming over. What do we do? What do we say? How do we prevent this? That's the residential community that's right across the street that we're somehow going to protect 5 parking spaces to not be too close to them from 16 to 21-year-old kids that always follow all the rules. So I just, again, would tell you that there's just no way that this in any manner fits to the overall community of what we have. I really appreciate your time. And
does anybody have any questions of Mr. Wilson? No? Thank you, sir. And then we had Mr. Birch.
Todd Birch, administrator at Foot and Ankle Specialist. We have 2 buildings, one on 2521 Countryside Boulevard, that's on the corner, and our other building is at 2515 Enterprise Road, which is our business office. I would like to submit to the board a letter from Dr. Bruce Levine, our managing doctor, who outlines our position on our practice. Within there, the main discussion is traffic. I'm not sure really what the traffic report shows. We were not given anything. From what we see, it's an infrastructure that's already strained, as already been discussed previously. The light at Countryside Boulevard and Enterprise does not have a turn signal, so traffic gets backed up. People trying to get into Chick-fil-A and Wawa making U-turns, as well as traffic being backed up trying to turn onto Enterprise. That's after you get through the light onto Enterprise, which is a 2-lane road. Then our office is right there, right off the corner. We already had 2 instances where pedestrians were almost hit by individuals trying to get into Chick-fil-A in our parking lot. We see numerous people trying to get to Wawa and Chick-fil-A using our grass, using our parking lot. Our patient base is that of the elderly, and it already has confusion getting in and out of our practice. So that's basically our stance on what's happening. And we just found out about this a couple weeks ago, so we didn't have really much time to digest most of this. So.
Does anybody have any questions, Mr. Birch?
Could you please point to your property on that map?
Right here, we have 2 buildings.
And which one is the business office?
The business office is right next to it. This is our main practice where patients are seen, and next to it is our business office, and then we have the drainage ditch. And then people are coming through this grassy area trying to get to Wawa and Chick-fil-A. They're also coming through our parking lot, which we had to put up a gate because traffic was trying to use our parking lot to get to Chick-fil-A and Wawa.
So if I understand you correctly, the people aren't taking the sidewalk around the front of Enterprise Road to Countryside Boulevard to get to Chick-fil-A and Wawa?
Not at all.
But between your property and this property, subject property, there is a full drainage ditch, a wet drainage ditch, is there not?
There is a drainage ditch and then a small piece of our property that they used to walk through.
Okay.
In between our building and the drainage ditch.
Yeah, between, on your side of it,
Mhm.
right.
That's if they feel like it's quicker to do that. They'll even use our parking lot to try to get through it.
Right.
Where we got patients trying to come in and out.
And so you think students will be walking from the school in the same manner across
Well,
your
they're
property?
gonna see it. It's happening often, so.
But there's, correct me if I'm wrong or not, is there a direct connection between this proposed or the property and your property? Wouldn't they have to go out to Enterprise Road first to get there and then go through your
They would
property?
walk out on Enterprise and
Right.
then walk through our grassy area to get to the parking lot.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Birch? All right, thank you, sir.
How do I submit this letter?
Oh, actually, I believe we have that letter. Is that the letter dated November
Yeah,
18th?
yeah.
Signed by Dr. Bruce J. Levine, 2
Correct.
pages.
Correct.
We've been given a copy of that both when we first got here and in the packet for Mr. Pressman.
Okay.
So I believe we have that. Thank you for bringing it along just in case. All right, going back to our process now, then we have cross-examination of witnesses by planning department and staff.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Pressman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. So I'm reviewing this traffic study, and I see here on the very first sentence, it says that he has conducted a cursory review of the traffic study. What does that mean?
We asked him, and he was paid a fee to review the traffic report that was submitted to the city. He reviewed that, and we asked him to respond if he saw any problems or issues.
Right, but my specific question is, what does it mean by having a cursory review? What is cursory?
What we asked him to do is not an in-depth analysis, but to read through the report and anything that he felt was wrong or an error, very plainly and clearly on the surface, he would report to us, which he did.
Okay, so he didn't do an in-depth analysis, is what you're telling me?
He did an analysis by a traffic engineer pointing out very severe elements of the report as he saw it.
Well, the question was, you testified he didn't do an in-depth analysis, so is it yes or no? He didn't do an in-depth?
My answer is that he did an analysis, and it was an analysis.
In-depth.
He did an analysis that resulted in significant points being raised.
So how much time did he spend?
I talked to him over a number of, I believe it was 3 days. So he spent, to my understanding, approximately 3 days looking through the report and working out what he thought was.
So he did a cursory review that lasted 72 hours?
He did a report, and an excellent summary of bullet points that showed errors in the report that was, in his opinion, that were submitted to the city.
So I'm going to assume you don't know how many hours he spent on the actual, reviewing the actual.
He worked very hard on it. We talked a number of times, and he was very industrious on it and was very interested in it and became very engaged with it.
So how many hours did he spend?
I have no idea.
You don't know? Okay, good. So this guy's out in Maitland, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, how many projects has he done in Clearwater in the last year?
I don't know, I work with him on two
Okay.
separate
How many projects has he done in Clearwater in the last quarter?
Very active and sought after traffic engineer.
How many projects has he done in Clearwater in the last quarter?
I have no idea.
How about the last week?
I have no idea.
All right, so if you don't know how many he's done in the last year, quarter, or week, how is this individual in a better position to opine about a project in Clearwater than Clearwater's engineers?
Oh, he's in a great position, because he was able to take a completed report by a traffic engineer and have more than enough time to review it and come up with, again, very constructive and very significant points.
Right, but you don't know how much time he spent on it.
Whatever time he spent was a great result as far as we're concerned.
Well, these 2 pages.
I think we asked him for a summary report, yes, sir, and I think he did an outstanding report.
Well, I appreciate you think he did an outstanding job, but you don't know how much time he spent, and you don't know how many projects he's done, right?
I think that's, with all due respect, for the citizens who are here who are concerned about their properties, they went out and hired their own expert, and I think it's very clear that he came back with significant concerns.
That wasn't the question, though. You don't know how much time he spent, and you don't know.
I gave you, with all due respect, sir, I gave the parameters that he had time to look at. He felt that he had appropriate time to do so. We paid him a fee to do so, and he was happy to do so.
Okay, so you yourself are not a traffic engineer, correct? And you're not a lawyer?
Absolutely.
And you're not a certified planner?
That's correct.
Okay, so how are you in a better position to opine that this application does not meet the general operability standard as you testified today than Mr. Perry?
I think these points are as clear as day. I don't think it takes an expert to point them out. I'm happy to present them in that manner to the board and let the board decide.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Do you have anybody else you'd like to cross-examine, Mr. Farino? Mr. Farino? Anyone else you want to cross-examine?
No, that's it.
No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so no further cross-examination by planning and development staff. Then we'll go on to cross-examination by witnesses of the applicant. Did you all have anybody you wanted to cross-examine in? Well, there'll be a point for this, for final closing statements, closing remarks. Mr. Pressman, from standpoint of party status, did you have any cross-examination of any of the witnesses?
We'll pass it.
Ms. Wilsey? Mr. Wilsey?
I don't really know what that means, so.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Mr. Birch? No. Okay, so no cross-examination, no further cross-examination. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to speak on this matter? There being none, then we'll go around to the closing remarks by planning and development staff first. No closing remarks from planning staff? Okay. Closing remarks by the persons granted party status. I'll begin with you, Mr. Pressman. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. Board members, an issue of this nature takes a leap of faith. I've sat on many boards, and every decision you make, you take a leap of faith by what information you've been given. And what have we gotten here? There's no guarantee of parking. There's no guarantee of the circulation. They showed a circulation plan. There's no guarantee or enforcement of it. There's no guarantee of bus or carpooling. There's no guarantee or enforcement. There's no guarantee of the number of students. There's no guarantee that they have any kind of control or monitors. They didn't talk about any monitors about kids walking around wherever, which is what kids do. But clearly what we've learned is, quote, from their application, quote, the school operates on 2 shifts which significantly reduces the peak hour traffic. But we learned here today, and we saw it from visiting the site, that there is no 2 shifts, that there's 200 students, then there's 400 students, and there's 200 students. That completely blows out by 200% what they submitted in the application. I just read that quote to you. I reread it in the report. That is a tremendous difference that will affect circulation, impacts on all the properties. And read the kidney care letter, what they write. They write to you that our patients come via publicly funded taxi or wheelchair van will be gridlocked during the normal patient drop-off, coinciding with the start of classes. The patients who arrive in wheelchairs, vans, or publicly funded taxis are on a tight schedule and often have 3 to 5 rides stacked up and cannot and will not wait in traffic to pick up or drop off our patients. Dr. Levine has the same issues. So I'm going to say for a 4th time, I'm sure these are good people. I'm sure this is good use. It's needed in the community. This is not where it belongs. And I'll summarize, or I'll finish. Actually, I'm going to say this. I think it's very telling that the entire abutting community, residential and offices, have come forward on the record opposing this request. And not a single person in the community that I'm aware of that I heard who lives there is in support.
So you have your general criteria. Number 6, that it minimizes adverse effects. This actually maximizes by 200% the adverse effects. Item number 5, consistent with the community character in the immediate vicinity. This is not in the same character that's in the immediate area. Criteria number 4, designed to minimize traffic. This will actually maximize traffic. Again, far outside of what they said they were going to do in terms of having 2 clean sweeps, let alone what our traffic engineer showed there were some errors. Item number 3, will not adversely affect the safety of persons residing or working in the area. Number 2, will not hinder or discourage the use of adjacent land buildings. I think personally you've heard a lot here that are concerned. But it comes back to this, again, when you vote, it takes a leap of faith, and we don't believe that you've had enough here to guarantee that there's a leap of faith, that these folks will have to live with this use for the next 10 or 20 years. We appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you very much, and for the city attorney as well.
Ms. Wilsey, do you have a closing remarks?
Well, I don't know, I can add on to what I said before, that's going to change my emotions behind this. I think I hear a lot of concerns, but I don't know that we're getting to the heart of the matter. Is somebody, you as an individual, invest in the community and remodel it and step it up and get business to come there and employ people. And this is what we're talking about. We're not saying that this school is not a great school. This is not the ideal place to run this school. And I don't know what is so complicated or so hard to comprehend that. To me, it's so simple, and everybody's trying to make it so difficult. Just the facts. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Wilsey, closing remarks?
Thank you, all of you, for the time and attention today. I guess I would just say we need your help. We had about 2 weeks to deal with this. Sandra and I have been big donors in the city. We're major donors to remodel and redevelop the Capitol Theater downtown. So we're all about development. We're all about making Clearwater great and a better city. And we're all about charter schools. This is not the location for a school of this magnitude. It's probably not the right location for a school of any type, but this type of 16-year-old to 21-year-old students that thriving to drive. This just isn't the right place. The community surrounding it, the Bean folks pointed out, already getting congested with the Wawa and the Chick-fil-A, and hopefully a great development to come into the Toys R Us property that I'm sure you all will nurture and make decisions with. And again, we need your help today to help evaluate this for the people that are there, the business owners that are there, 1, 2, to the north, to the south, to the east, the people knocking on my door today to want to sign a petition that Mark had dropped off on Friday, the residents in the community across the street. It's concerns for all the right reasons. As Sandra said, it's pretty simple. And I just want you all to know that we are proponents of development. We have supported development in many times. Mr. Perry, for going through what he does, we totally appreciate it. As I mentioned, I am concerned about the words approximately. I think that's a difficult word to use when you're talking about eliminating parking spaces for our employees, for our clients, for all of the neighboring tenants, employees and their clients. And I would hope that you guys can evaluate that and have the ability to discern what might work and why we maybe made the investment that we did to buy the property 5-7 years ago, and to remodel and upgrade the community the way we felt we have. I would encourage you to all look at what we did to this property to improve it, and the employees that we hire and improve. And I think as the number of your list, this will greatly and severely and adversely affect our property values and our abilities to grow our business in the city. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And last thing, and I guess if I answer, I'm not an expert on any of this, okay? But I do, as Sandra said, you can just easily walk around and see where's a right place for a school of 400 kids passing through. And this isn't the right development. This just isn't it. Thank you.
Mr. Birch?
Just a brief reminder that you have to base your evidence, your decision on the evidence that you've heard today. And I'm sure that wasn't the implication, but in as much as people have done things for the city through donation or activism, that's not evidence that you can base your decision on.
Thank you.
I wasn't trying to imply that.
I know, I'm just reminding.
He's our Jiminy Cricket on our shoulders to remind us. Mr.
I
Birch?
don't have much more to add, but I would like to see, I don't know how to get one, a traffic report. I'd like to see what it has in it for the rest of the doctors to look at. Hopefully it addresses the traffic light on Enterprise and Countryside Boulevard, not having a turn signal and the congestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing remarks by the applicant.
Thank you. First, I'd like to introduce Jerry Grabowski. He's the traffic engineer, local traffic engineer, to address everybody's comments on the traffic. And then we'll give it back to Donna to talk about some of the security issues.
You've still got 3 minutes, so make it brief.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Depkowski, Senior Traffic Engineer with Georgia F. Young.
Can you spell your last name for?
Sorry.
Spell your last name for the record.
Jerry, Jerry, Dapkowski is D as in David, A as in Apple, B as in boy, Kowski, Dapkowski. Okay. I'm a professional traffic engineer of 40 years. Lived in the city of Clearwater for the last 30 years. I lived on Countryside Boulevard for 30 years. My doctor is on Enterprise Road, right there just off of US 19. My dermatologist is on Enterprise Road, just off of US 19. I visit Chick-fil-A on a regular basis. I go to Red Lobster on a regular basis. I didn't have to use an aerial to put the traffic report together. So a couple things. The leap of faith. My background, I started with the Florida Department of Transportation doing traffic studies. I then served in Washington, D.C. on the ITE Trip Generation Committee, helped writing how much traffic gets generated by different types of developments. I was hired by a DOT to solve Countryside High School's 4,000 students problem of how to get in and out. I was hired to work on Clearwater High School, how to make that a more safe road along State Road 60. So I have a real extensive background in schools, charter schools, et cetera, et cetera. So the leap of faith that they're asking for is I'll share a lot of personal data that I know for this location and how these things work. The first thing is we actually met with your traffic engineer, Bennett, the city traffic engineer, to talk about this. And it was brought up in their traffic engineer that we used the wrong ITE trip rates, and he is absolutely wrong. Per Bennett and my conversation, ITE actually has the charter school designation, and that's what should be used for this. So we did use the correct trip generation numbers per your city engineer and per my thoughts. The other thing is we didn't take any discounts for the existing traffic that's coming out of the existing building. Your city traffic engineer said, no, I would like a full analysis with brand new traffic of what would be generated by the charter school. So this analysis takes into consideration the worst case scenario for traffic, parking, everything. We didn't discount anything in the study. There will be no on-site queuing. We did analysis of the driveway. We did analysis along Enterprise. The levels of service that we use in the traffic industry are very high. Levels of service are essentially A through F, just like your report card. A means you're a good student. F means you got some problems. It's the same on the road. Level of service A on a road means it's free flow. Level of service F means you got a parking lot on the road. In this case, the lowest level of service is level of service B, as in boy. That includes the intersection of Enterprise and Countryside. There's discussion about the Chick-fil-A causing a lot of traffic issues. Those are out on Countryside Boulevard, not in Enterprise. So I'd be glad to answer any further questions you might have.
He's used up all the time for your closing remarks, so, okay.
Can I ask questions or not?
What's that?
Can I ask questions at this point?
Mr. Daniel, yeah, we could, yes.
I just have, because I've done traffic studies, and that's why I guess they put engineers on these occasionally. Not to the extent of yours, and I'm not questioning in any way your your experience. IT is Institute of Traffic Engineers you're referring to. How did they, I mean, I'm just to understand what would happen, because I take that intersection going to Lowe's a lot. I turn the other way, and it can get a little bit dicey. Right now, there's no Toys R Us there anymore, so they couldn't have used those numbers for what's coming out of Toys R Us or some of the other vacant properties. So I know putting down those tubes and stuff would not have helped do with traffic count. How did you handle, how did you handle the traffic at the intersection and Countryside? How did you come up with that estimate?
We actually had cameras out in the intersection that record for 24 hours. Then those cameras go back to our offices, and we actually have a person that watches it for however many hours we need. Typically, it's 8 hours, 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. What I love about this charter school is it's actually operating during those very off-peaks. Kids are going to be starting to go to school at 6:30 in the morning. Okay, the only thing that's even open at that time is Wawa. Everything along Enterprise is closed. There's no traffic on that section of Enterprise. So ultimately, we use a camera so nobody knows we're out there counting. We don't use road tubes. It's the most accurate way to do it.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Just out of general, how much time does it take to do a study like this? You talked about your study. How long does it take to do a comprehensive
We
study?
started in July.
So it takes
about 3.5 months.
3.5 months to do it.
Correct.
They cost a lot of money then, don't they?
Thank you, developer.
Well, I am asking though then, okay, thank you very much.
Well, and to just answer the further question, your city traffic engineer requested that we wait until school opens up before we did any counts. So it's the worst traffic out there.
May I just have one question? Is there any concern about that potential hour overlap between the shifts?
There is not. The reason being is a lot of the internal folks on that site go out to US 19 frontage road. If you call any one of those doctor's offices, medical offices, they'll tell you we're behind Red Lobster. So just about everybody uses the frontage road to go north-south or to get back to Countryside. Very easy to do.
Thank you.
Quick question, was the scope of your work limited to the traffic study, or was there a parking demand study as well?
There wasn't a parking demand study. We used ITEs and local parking standards for this type of a school, and that was used to determine how many spaces.
And did that take into consideration the overlap?
Yes.
Any other questions? All right. Okay, well, that would include the...
Let me suggest that you open up the speaker to some cross-examination by the city and the persons holding party status.
Okay, I will accept that recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Does the city have any questions of the expert from the applicant? Does anybody from party status, Mr. Pressman, do you have any questions?
Questions?
Of him in particular?
No.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of him in particular?
I just have a question about.
You have to come to the microphone so it can make part of the record.
I just have the question of how do you, what is the definition of approximately?
Approximately in terms of?
Come closer to the microphone so it gets picked up by the record. Thank you.
We use approximately based upon several different things. We don't use it for analysis because we have actual numbers that we use for analysis. But we might say that traffic may increase by 5% in approximately 5 years. So we use that as almost like a range for future traffic.
Anybody else with party status have a question of this gentleman? No? No? Okay. Thank you then. All right, so that would close the public hearing portion of things right now.
Well, quickly, is it possible to ask one last question of staff? Or is that?
Yeah, I'll do that. I have a question for Daniel before I officially close public comment anyway, so public hearing is good. So go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. Quick question. In the RC district, I understand it's not CG, but under the RC sub-district, the school is allowed by right as long as it's not, the only reason it's here today is because of the 200-foot radius from the residential property, is that correct?
Is it
Or is there,
it's an FLD. It would come here regardless.
so it comes here regardless?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so all off-street parking is located 200 feet from the property designated, so that's just an element of it, but that's not what kicked it into level 2?
No, what kicked it into level 2 was that's
the
what
use as an
designated in the
electric,
first
yeah,
place. So
as a
they're not
school.
asking for flexibility from the criteria.
Okay.
In our opinion, it meets the criteria. It would have to come here no
Regardless.
matter what, because of the use and its sub-district.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you a question, too?
Go ahead.
It says here, schools are required to be viewed as part of a level 2 flexible development application within this district. So that's why we're here.
Exactly
Because we're
right.
just looking at it.
Yep.
But we're saying it's a school. Now, if this charter school, I'm just trying to educate myself, if it becomes a adult college, does it
That's a
change
different
anything?
use.
It would be the same thing.
No, that,
What would be, instead of a charter school, it would have to come back here if it became
became something else that wasn't a minimum standard use, that required it to come back here, then it would have to come back here.
But would it change a school type from one school to another, elementary or college? Be a change of type?
College is an educational facility. If it becomes a college, that's a different use. Off the top of my head, I don't even know if that's permitted in this district. If it becomes an elementary school, that is still a school, no change of use. If it becomes a middle school, no change of use. That fits within the definition of school in our code. If it becomes K through 8 or K through 12, still a school. As long as it meets the definition of a school, per the definitions in Article 8 of our Community Development Code, there's no change of use. Vocational type of school is a different use. A college, 2-year, 4-year, that's a different use. And we look at it as different a use as if it were to become a restaurant. It's a different thing in our code. It's a different animal.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Daniel, I've got a question for you, because I know that we're on this board and we kind of apply our personal experience and knowledge to the facts that are presented so we can interpret and so on and so forth. Without saying one way or the other what I see or know, I know where the school is, and because the current school is in terms of their use and so on and so forth. That's just for me to know in the back of my head. That's not really something that we talk about, because it could color things one way or another, and I just don't want to misstep anything in terms of that, because I drive past there every morning to go to Dunkin' Donuts, which is right down in the same plaza, and I've got my own experiences with it in that regard. I know that's not any kind of a comfort thing. I'm just saying from that standpoint, that kind of actually weighs into what I've seen there, into what I'm looking at. And it's not necessarily the evidence today. So do I exclude all what I know from that standpoint? I just want to make sure it's clear and
You need to base your decision on the evidence that you've heard today.
fair enough. Okay. That's, as an attorney, I can understand that and comprehend that, so I'll do it accordingly. All right, thank you. All right, so that closes the public hearing portion of this. Now we have discussion and vote by the board. With a matter like this, I think that some feedback from each of you all before I take a motion makes the most amount of sense. Ms. Lau, you kind of nodding, how would you like to begin?
Sure. I heard a lot from the people with party status talking about the notice that they received and the ability to prepare. I'm always sensitive to notice concerns, but I don't hear any evidence or testimony from anyone that the notice requirements of the code were not met, and I believe that they were. I'm reacting to Mr. Perry's testimony where he listed all of the permitted uses within the buildings on this general property. And it's clear to me that this school is a permitted use in this area. And I'm sympathetic with the folks who purchased their property or invested with certain expectations based on the conditions on the site at the time. But if this is a permitted use under the code, and I'm prepared to accept the planning staff's testimony that the proposal does meet all of the requirements of the code, and I'm prepared to accept their recommendation, subject to hearing from everyone else, because I think that's important. I agree with the chair.
Flannery, do you want
I know this is a judicial hearing, but it's also quasi-judicial in that I think the goal of what we're trying to do up here is to come up to things that work instead of having it's not one against the other. This is not a two-party, and I feel sadly that here probably somebody was able to spend 3 months preparing the right traffic facility, and somebody else is asked to do it in 3 days, and they're not at the same standard. I do wish that we had a understanding of this traffic between 2 traffic engineers that see it equally, and 3 traffic engineers, the city, the one that was hired, and the ones, and I also feel badly that the people that are already there have to spend all this money to fend off something that they should feel they're sort of sitting there on something that they know what it is. It's just changing of ground on somebody that, you don't expect something to go up next to you that has not been normal. So I would have preferred a lot that going back to my first concern is that they didn't hear about it. There was no way back when they had the system apparently just leaves out the people that are there out of the system until it's like last minute. And you'd think in the review committee they would have said, well, let's talk to the people that live there, not the 200-foot radius. It's my parking. It's everything else that's going through. And so I think while my feelings now is I would have voted for it, no question, as a school. I think it's a great place to have it and for the students, except that the parking is a real problem, people trafficking through, and I wish there was one more shot at getting together and saying, let's work out this traffic in some way that we can do something before we just find out, flip a coin on one or the other. So that's my concern, is I wish you would just come back a little bit more when the people that are concerned about it had a chance to have some input instead of right in front of us with papers handing out as I'm sitting here. Thank you.
Brian, did you have anything?
I'm not concerned about the parking. I mean, they have a cross access and parking agreement. That's what it's for. So they all share the parking. They meet the code required calculation. So, we have a traffic expert, 40 years, that put together a traffic report, and the city agrees with it. Is it the best place for a school? I don't know, but it's an allowable use, and it meets the requirement, so I don't see any evidence that would allow me to go against the staff recommendation.
I agree with Mr. Flannery. I don't feel like we had enough time to review this. We just got this today, this other traffic study. Not enough information. I do feel, though, that it does meet the requirements of the code.
It's a real tough one. I think that it's here as a level 2 application because it has to be contemplated. It's not simply by right. I think that it's allowable in the district. I think that given if the school was not in a cross access and didn't have to rely on other properties, I think it would be cut and dry. I think the fact that it has an impact on the adjacent the adjacent property owners because they share property, because they have common elements, because they can't provide fences between themselves. I think that this is an issue for this property. In my opinion, I think that because of that, the applicable criteria of how does it impact the adjacent properties, the items that have been listed, I think they do come into play here greater than if this was on a standalone property. So from my standpoint, it's I do appreciate the school. I do like the idea of the school. I don't think I would support the school in this location, given the current circumstances of where it's, how it interfaces with the rest of the property.
Mr. Rocky, do you have anything?
Tough one. Everybody's got good valid points on this. I go back to it, as I know, Michael, you deal with this in your world too, this cross egress ingress egress easement agreement with parking agreement. You know, I'm looking at, and I pulled it up on the aerial, the one property that's out in front there. It looks like there's 30-some parking spaces right adjacent to you, which is probably sufficient for your use. It's above what code is. But I also see, I tried to find in this agreement if there's anything in there that gives you the sole exclusive right to that parking in front of your buildings. And you know, I'm not an attorney, I didn't see it, but it's not a new agreement. This agreement was in place when everybody bought the properties that are there right now. They know what they were getting into as far as cross ingress egress goes and parking restrictions. So, you know, I wish it was laid out differently, that parking was more surrounding the buildings instead of being more up along the frontage road on 19. But again, I kind of agree with Mr. Barker too about the use. You know, it's, and staff report on it that the use is conducive to the area.
Mr. Yaskevich?
I'm very conflicted. It's obviously a permissible use. I think it meets some of the, basically the spirit of the US 19 corridor in some respects, but it's a very compact space, and a lot of these uses, I think, will overlap, especially with regard to pedestrian circulation, and you know, there's a discussion about fencing and not really being able to separate the spaces as well. I'm concerned that maybe it's not the right mix, and because of that, it's perhaps not in harmony, and I'm not sure, I'm not completely in agreement that it's appropriate relationship. And those are some of the criteria listed, so it's hard for me to get over that.
Thanks. And not to repeat everything we said, but, you know, I look at the cross-parking and cross-access agreement, and as Mr. Petrocchi pointed out, that's my world. That's the kind of stuff that I work on in the real estate side of things. And, you know, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that has property there that an agreement exists and that it could have an impact that cuts both ways. It benefits the owners because it's non-specific when they have a demand and they get their customers in there before, and it's detrimental when other people's customers get in there before you, but it's part of what you kind of bought into in that context. So I'm not overly convinced about that. I did want to note that we didn't have an opportunity to question or qualify the expert, that the property owners, they brought a cursory review report, and while we were able to ask the other experts some questions, we didn't have an opportunity for them to ask them as well, which it makes it difficult for me to say that how much do I put into that, since it's some statements based upon the review. They're calling it a cursory review, and I'd actually circled cursory review before Mr. Fuino started asking his questions, so I guess we lawyers think alike in that regard in terms of what does that exactly mean. But I think that overall, it seems it's a challenging one, because I've seen more and more charter school uses in these types of repurposed buildings, facilities, projects, plazas across the area, and it seems to be where they can make it work from a financial standpoint to bring that benefit to this population that they serve, or those students. It concerns me because it may not seem like it's in place, but it is an environment that suits these, and seems to prove over and over again that it does. So it's difficult, because I think there's going to be some challenges. No different than the challenges that I would have looking for parking back when my kids were much younger, and I'd try to go to that Toys R Us between now and Christmas and try and buy a gift for them. The challenges have been there, and they'll be there again at some point as well in that regard, and some of it will be from the school and for other intensive use in those properties. So I'm kind of up in the air. I'm giving it some thoughts still, but unless there's any other comments, does somebody have a motion on this one?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve case number FLD 2019-08026, based on the evidence and testimony presented in the application, staff report, and at today's hearings, and to adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with conditions of approval as listed.
Do I have a second on the motion? Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion before we go to a vote? You're an alternate on the end, so we're going to do the vote with the 7 of us, because we have a full board here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Let's do a roll call vote so it's clear. Mr. Barker?
Aye.
Mr. Fleming? Ms. Lau?
Aye.
Mr. Barry?
Nay. Aye.
Nay.
And I say aye. That's 4-3. Okay. So that would pass 4-3 on this matter. And that concludes this hearing. Next item on our agenda is the director's items. Anything from,
I just wanted to let you know, we have been working on a citizen's guide to quasi-judicial hearings, so I wanted to let you know that we didn't forget about that. Legal has drafted something. It's really in our court right now. I think it's a very comprehensive document, and I think we may want to break it up, serve different audiences. So sometime at the beginning of the year, January, February, we'll probably be bringing that to you to share with you.
okay, very good. Does anybody have any questions of staff?
I have one. How will it be distributed?
We'll put it online, make it available to citizens. We'll probably share it with the neighborhoods. My thought is that we have a newsletter that our neighborhood coordinator sends out to all the registered neighborhood associations, so we'll probably post it in that as well.
All right. Thank you. I think we adjourn for today.
Everyone have a good Thanksgiving.
Yes, everyone have a great
it's coming
Thanksgiving.
up.